Alrighty, guys, so we've been talking a lot in past months, past years about Disney live-action remakes because, well, live-action remakes have just been a topic of conversation for quite a bit now. We've got the How to Train Your Dragon one coming out, and that one has just conflicted me so much because I feel like I should be opposed to these things, especially the ones that are just remaking their films shot for shot, basically, just like The Lion King did. And, you have films like The Jungle Book or Cinderella that kind of adapted the animated film to live action, which is great. I love those. I loved Aladdin, and Aladdin was more faithful to the source material, but it still did some adaptation. I think it was great. Then you have, Little Mermaid, which is fine. So I've been very on the fence with these live action remakes, especially from Disney. They've been very hit or miss for me. And so when they announced Snow White, right, because Aladdin, for example, wasn't an animated film from Disney that I was particularly excited to see brought to live action, but it was the execution, right? So when they announced they were going to do Snow White, I was like, well, out of the Disney canon, the animated Disney canon, this was probably one of the last films that I would have wanted to see brought to life, just because I just don't have an attachment to this film. I don't think it's particularly interesting as an adult, so I wasn't too sure about this one. But I said, let's bring on good talent. Rachel Zegler is phenomenally talented, and Gal Gadot, we'll see. She was really good as Diana Prince, as Wonder Woman, but Evil Queen, okay, we'll see about that. And then we kind of went on from there. So then eventually we got those first trailers. And the first trailers were interesting, and they ended, I believe, with a shot of the Seven Dwarfs, who, in my opinion, because some people, and I'm not going to say anyone's right or wrong, it's just personal taste, but some people were like, oh, interesting, I like the CGI design of the dwarves. I think they look horrific. I think they look terrifying, something out of a video game half-rendered nightmare. That's just my personal opinion. And the second trailer that's been playing in front of movies in past months has not assuaged my fears. I think they still look crazy and they still look terrifying to me. And I think it's weird. I really think it's weird. I don't know. Again, I don't know how you could have done it in 2025 in terms of just making it not strange, but it was just weird. It was just strange. I mean, I think back to The Hobbit, right? And they were able to make those dwarves look so real and so, I don't know. Maybe you could have done something like that. Anyways. So I've been watching the trailers and I just haven't been convinced. Also, the other thing about it is Gal Gadot has not looked convincing at all as the queen to me. She just doesn't look intimidating. It looks like Gal Gadot is, Diana Prince, it's just wearing a costume and pretending to be evil. And I'm not entirely convinced about it. That being said, I've always said this. I go into every movie and every show with an open mind because what's the worst that can happen? I can end up liking it. And that's the best case scenario. So I've been waiting for reactions for the first Snow White, for the first reactions and first reviews. Now, I was actually going to do a segment after the first initial reactions coming out of the theater, the social media reactions, because I was like, oh, wow, interesting. There was some interesting comments there. But then I thought, well, the reviews are going to come out in a couple of days, so let's just wait until the reviews come out and let's do a segment about this. By the time you're watching this segment, the movie will have already come out probably, and so you might have been able to see it for yourself. I will try to watch it for next week's episode or even the week after, so we'll eventually get to it, but I will probably not be able to. In fact, I definitely won't be able to watch it in time for this episode, which is why we're talking about the reviews and reactions. So anyways, I thought it was interesting because the first reactions were generally pretty positive. I've gotten into a mindset, though, of not really trusting these first reactions because they're generally skewed pretty positive, and the reviews will actually come out and they'll be like, okay, not as good as I thought. So I wanted to see, is that the case? Because there was a realm in which these reactions bore out a 70% on Rotten Tomatoes, which is pretty good. And again, Rotten Tomatoes is not the be-all, end-all of review systems, but it's just a helpful metric for me. So then I waited for the reviews, and we're going to read through, on Rotten Tomatoes, they have a list of the critics and a list of the reviews, and they have the little blurbs with the rotten or fresh sign. And I wanted to read out some of these blurbs. We're going to read them for the first time, but just to preface this, right? Just to preface this entire conversation, Snow White currently, as I'm recording this, has a 48%, and that's going to go up or it's going to go down, but it's going to probably stay within the 40 to 60 range. And that's about where I thought it was going to be before the reactions came out, maybe even a little lower. So honestly, I'm not too terribly shocked, about any of this. In fact, I think Little Mermaid, for comparison, had something like a 55%. So, and I liked Little Mermaid. I didn't love it, but I liked it. So I think it's interesting. I think that this film is going to have a whole range of reactions as that number suggests. So we're just going to go through. I'm just going to start out from the top, and we're going to try to read the top critics ones. Not because I'm biased towards top critics or anything like that, but just because, otherwise I'm going to be here for 3 hours reading every single little blurb. So this first one here is going from the top here. It says, quote, "I had high hopes that Snow White would make me happy. Instead, this dopey remake made me sleepy and grumpy." Some of these critics really like their puns, I've been noticing. So yeah, that's one, and that was a rotten review. Just to be clear, let's find another top critic. Here is another top critic's little blurb here. Quote, "The most distracting flaws are rooted in the problematic recreation of the animated material." Okay, interesting. And I haven't read any of these before. I mentioned this earlier, but I haven't read any of these before, so we're reading them together for the first time. "The permanent magic hour lighting is hard to look at. Worst of all, the decision to cartoonize the dwarves alongside human actors is hugely problematic." Okay, so there's somebody who, this is obviously a rotten review, for those of you who couldn't tell. This is somebody who just thought what is it? The dwarves didn't really work. The design of the dwarves didn't really work. So let's go on to another top critic here. Quote, "A fascinating case study in today's impossible contradictions, a magic mirror reflecting the tensions of the current times." That seems like it generally is positive, but it actually skews negative. Let's read another one. This is, top critic here. "Some parts of the film work better than others, but none of it has the sweetness and imagination of the animated feature. This Snow White is not the fairest of them all. It's just, fair." That one's rotten. So, interestingly, the top critics seem to be skewing towards the negative, but I found one here that's positive. So, and this one's pretty positive, actually. Quote, "A visually stunning, thematically rich adaptation that successfully modernizes the classic tale. This is a fairy tale for a new generation, one that reminds us all of the power of courage, kindness, and believing in a better future." Interesting. I'll load a couple more here. Let's take a look and see if anything else jumps out. But yeah, this is from Variety. This is a fresh review. And the quote is, quote, "The chirpy, vivacious, just romantic enough to get by Snow White proves to be an exception to the rule." So this person doesn't seem like they enjoy the Disney live action remakes too much, but they enjoyed Snow White here. Going through really quickly, a lot of these are more on the negative side from the top critics. I'll read this one's from the San Francisco Chronicle, a top critic, and they really liked the film, at least. They gave it a fresh, and says, quote, "Efficiently directed by Mark Webb with an excellent production design by Cave Quinn, I think. Snow White is everything you need it to be and nothing more." So that one is more middle of the road, but they decided to give it a fresh rating. So again, 48% means half the critics like it and half the critics don't. This is honestly about where I would have thought in terms of probability. Like if you had said, okay, give me 100 different scenarios for Snow White in terms of likelihood, I would have probably, the majority of them would have said it's going to hover around the 50%. The first reactions are always interesting because they were very positive for the film. And a lot of people were like, yeah, this is really good. This is really fun. And so I just find this interesting. We'll have to see. But I think, a win for Disney, and the box office projections don't look too great for Snow White, but a win for Disney really would look like, well, critics are fine with it, find a good with it, and audiences seem to like it, and then they make some money, and they hopefully try to break even, and they move on from it. I think at this point, that's probably the best case scenario for this, right? Or the Rotten Tomato score hovers, above 50% at a certain point. The audience score is 70 to 80%, and the box office, I don't know what the production was, but I have to imagine it's not low. So the box office reaches about 400 million, because again, Little Mermaid quietly made a lot of money. Little Mermaid made $550 million. So that's probably the best case scenario for Disney. But guys, those are the first reviews and reactions to Snow White. Are you surprised by any of this, or does this kind of track with your expectations? Let me know in the comments down below.